Mentor, Interviews with the Experts. I am your host, Chris Garrett, and today my guest is Dr. Maria Katsamanis, and she is from Greece, and her bio, oh my gosh, Maria, this is absolutely amazing. I'm going to have to ask you to tell our folks a little bit about your background and where you're from and some of these amazing things that you've done, and then we'll get into your book. Is that okay?
That's great, Chris. Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for having me. I very much appreciate it.
Well, we're grateful that you would take the time to be with us. I know you work a great deal with Dominique Barbier and Walter Zettel, and it is with Dominique that you wrote your new book, The Alchemy of Lightness. Is that correct?
That's right. Actually, over the years, I've been influenced by many people. Two of my biggest influences have been with Dominique and Walter. Dominique approached me about 3 years ago to write this book together, and it took us that long to write it. Both of us are very, very busy people, so we felt it was a pretty much of a miracle that it was done within that timeline.
Well, when I was reading your bio, and if you'll forgive me for interrupting the book for just a moment, I want to let people know a little bit about your background. Now, you're originally from Greece, is that correct?
That's right.
And then you have studied in France and the United States, worked with numerous trainers, but some of the things you have done are so out of the box, such as you get to work with the very rare Marwari. Did I say that right? Marwari horses?
Yes, Marwari. The Marwari horses, I tell you, Chris, it really, really is a privilege. I'm one of the few trainers around the world that has worked with every Marwari horse outside of India. There's been a ban to export them from India, and so there's, I think, just about 24, 25 outside of India. And I've worked with all of them, and I had the privilege of riding as a display rider at the Queen's Jubilee, the Royal Winter Horse Show, about 2 years ago with the group, with the Marwaris, and since then have been having them for winter training with me here in New Jersey for the past 3 years. So I do know a lot about the breed, and they are very, very, very unique.
Well, for our listeners who have never seen a Marwari horse, you can look it up on Google, and it's spelled M as in Mary, Marwari. And you've probably seen pictures of them before. They're the horses with the ears that curl up and point toward each other. They seem to be a pretty round-bodied horse, but with a long, elegant neck. Would that be accurate?
Yes, that is accurate. They are known for, as you just described, is the heart-shaped horses. When their ears tip forward, they come in the shape of a heart, and when they go back, they come into the shape of a Celtic harp.
I hadn't heard that.
Yeah,
how fun.
It's quite a different view from the top, I can tell you that. And they are very, very unique. In fact, when I first met them, I think the first year I had them in training, even their smell was quite different to me. Almost their odor was rather different, and their whinny and neighs, that is very different, distinctly different from most horses. In fact, to me, it sounded like a horse with an accent.
They have an Indian accent.
I know, I tell you.
Oh my!
It's so cute. Yeah, it's just a very unique animal. I hadn't really worked with anything like it before, so that's really been a privilege for me. And they're very intelligent. In fact, one of my young stallions, a Marwari stallion, I taught him the jambet simply from just showing him my leg, lifting my leg, and he followed me. They're extremely sensitive and can sometimes be considered maybe not ideal for dressage, but I beg to differ. And they've been a fantastic force to really highlight the kind of things that Dominique and I talk about in our book. The
Well, let's go back to that, because we could do a whole hour, I think, on the Marwari horses. But today I'd really like to talk about your new book, The Alchemy of Lightness, and about Dominique and about the kind of work you do. Now, most of our audience are dressage riders, and there's the word lightness is being thrown around, at least in my world, horse world, an awful lot now. And I'm not sure people truly understand, including me, what that actually means. I mean, I know some trainers that are using that term and using the terms classical that, in my eyes, seem to be extremely aggressive, demanding, and not at all light or classical type writers, but that nobody knows the definition well enough to understand what are they seeing. So I'd like to start with what inspired you to write the book, The Alchemy of Lightness?
Right. Well, the most important thing for me was, Chris, to be a part of leaving behind a philosophy of being with horses that will endure through time. I see so much aggression, and I don't mean I'm not putting myself in the category of either competition or classical rider. I really do feel that these camps take away from essentially some very basic and enduring principles of horsemanship that we have strayed from. And again, I'm not against competition. I think the more we look towards some of these things that have endured through time, the better we can be for our horses and as riders. But I see so much aggression and ego in the equestrian community, and no major advances to bring us closer to connecting to something bigger, more powerful, that I wanted to be a part of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the connection with the horse and outside of just ribbons. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So what principles or new ways or old ways of thinking about riding do you bring up and address in the book?
Well, the first thing I think is hopefully what we've done is bring to the foreground of people's minds, Chris, that our relationship with the horse is key. I mean, I have examples of, I just came off a full day of riding horses and giving lessons, and it just goes back to that idea that we really are two species sharing a connection that I think predates any gadgets or formulas. I mean, the idea that everything is formulaic. I think some of and I don't want to put names out there, but we hunt so much for a template of some sort. But the process of, in the moment, figuring out what our horse needs is something that eludes us. And so the inclusion of some of the scientific information to explain that relationship, I hope, allows for a new way of thinking. I think that when I can talk esoterically about lightness and connection, but the idea to be able to bring in some concrete, verifiable scientific findings that essentially illustrate that this can exist between two beings, hopefully will open people's mind, regardless of discipline, actually, about that process. So science helps to explain what Dominique and I experience every day with our horses.
Well, with your background as both a psychologist and a dressage trainer, does having both the human and the horse piece, are you able to break that down into, you called it the science, into the pieces, or what is behind the art of the equitation?
Yes, that's a good question. I always thought of it as the science behind the art of equitation because, every painter, every great painter, behind the art, there's a science behind the brush strokes and the type of paint and all that. And in writing, it's the same thing. I mean, before you can aspire to lightness and all that, you really need to feel comfortable just sitting on a horse, feeling safe, having some trust, grappling with fear. And once those things become more unconscious, then we aspire to higher orders of consciousness. For us, the science behind the art of equitation was a perfect marriage from my own experiences in both arenas. So in the end, both professional caps contend with mammals, different species, but with mammals. So I'm kind of fortunate that my education as a scientist helped me kind of articulate the experience we aspire with our horses.
Now, you mentioned lightness again, and I'm going to put you on the spot here. How do you define lightness in a horse? What is it? What is it?
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, and I oh, my goodness, cream puffs. It's, those little fluffy cakes.
Yes.
Lightness, it's funny because actually one of the first discussions Dominique and I had was just that. And I think as a neonate, young, up-and-coming trainer, my I rushed in to give a definition of it, and and he stopped me, and he said, it's much easier than that. And we had a discussion about what that meant, easier than that, and I think we both concluded that lightness, it's not something that you have to make happen. It's already there. Forces come to us already light. They're already open. They're already available. They're already ready. In fact, even to maintain that lightness of spirit, it's our responsibility, and that's where we get into trouble. We don't want to take responsibility for how we come to them and in being the same way every day. Another part of it is being completely present without all the pushing, the pulling, a lot of the spurs and restraints that block this. So I do believe that lightness, the different tiers of lightness, no different than if you had, a dressage scale with the different, the rhythm, relaxation, so forth. Lightness, aspiration to lightness I think, comes from accepting that it's already there. You don't have to push to make a horse light. Lightness of spirit and mind is the most primitive and primal block. And recognizing that we need to be open, available, and ready, and that they're already waiting for us.
Oh boy, you said that it's simpler than that, but I'm trying to imagine how, as human beings, we can let that happen simply. And it sounds huge. I'm not sure.
And I hate
to seem simple.
and I hate to be so cursory too, Chris, because in just a few questions to be able to summarize essentially what our book really details. That it goes into the details of also philosophically why all the pushing and pulling takes away from lightness. We're trying to push and pull to create lightness, and what we're saying here, Dominique and I, is all the pushing and pulling is taking away the lightness that's already there.
So it's less is more. It's actually doing less, but doing it with a light mind, and it's more than just light on the reins. It's more. It was what I'm hearing, right? I mean, as a rider, when you hear, okay, lightness, the first thing you think of is, okay, well, don't pull on the reins. Don't be heavy on the reins. Be light on the reins. But you're talking about be light in your mind and light in your attitude and light in everything. It isn't just about the physical pulling. It's
exactly.
Okay. Hence
because
the
pushing, the pushing too can be very much Chris mental. Like today I had a session with a woman learning in handwork, and while she was never pushing with her hand, her energy, it was so clear that even her intent was so intense about wanting an outcome that she was literally, her energy, pushing the horse. And when she was able to step back and allow something else to happen and to really connect with him, not so much as you will do this, but I just want you to be comfortable, let me help you, that shift in energy allowed him to actually give her a lot more in hand. So the pushing is not only physical pushing, it's mental pushing. We come to them with a lot. I mean, we put a lot on our horses, and I include myself. I have to check myself every day. And in fact, in my clinics, I have a whole kind of what do they call those things? What is it? In the gym, they used to do those 30-minute things where you have to go from one machine to the next. Do you know that?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. It's one of those, so I have one of these
circuit. The circuit.
A circuit. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. A circuit. Sorry. A circuit that I have a circuit that helps people identify. It includes biofeedback, a session with a capnometer, actually looking at the way your end-tidal CO2, your breath work is really working in a very detailed way. I actually have an equicizer, a mechanical horse that I use in a very comprehensive way. It's actually quite funny, and a trampoline, all to help people understand how. When I say we are responsible to come to them in the same way, meaning open, available, and ready. Well, what does that mean? Well, I put them in that position before they ever get on the horse to experience that. If you're really, really low energy that day, don't wait to sit on your horse to create something. Put your music on. Get on the trampoline. Create that momentum. So when you get on, you don't have to go for your legs. You don't have to go pushing with your spurs. You can use that judiciously. And so there's a lot we can do ourselves to come and be more present to our animals. But that goes hand in hand with coming to our relationships more available and open. and how hard that can be.
Well, there's one little trick that Dominique mentions in one of his videos, which a friend of mine loaned me a video as I wanted to have some background before we talked, and I just loved it. And he said as simple a thing as always have a smile on your face. And my husband and I went out and worked with his new horse, and we kept reminding each other to smile because we, of course, forget within seconds. And you know what? The horse really was different, and we were giggling about it after a while. It's like, oh, gotta smile, gotta smile. And it does change your energy, just that one little thing. So that was kind of fun.
Absolutely. That's completely Dominique. But all that is just the things we can do, even the little things. We don't have to do great things, but just that shift. You know, in psychology, that there's a theory that James Lang and Cannon Bard theories, and they speak about don't wait to feel the emotion. Create the physical change in your body that will then correspond to the emotion. So don't wait to be happy. Create a happy face, or a happy body, and then your body will follow with the corresponding emotion.
I like that.
That's true. And that's true with horses. I really believe that. I see it every day. I mean, in addition to the fact that I think Dominique, I'm very proud to have worked on with him. In particular, there are a lot of great horse people around the world, but I do believe that as a horseman, I don't know of anyone that for the past 40 years has stuck to the same principles. Very easy to get seduced and pulled away. I have been over the years with the seduction of competition or this and that. I think that there's very few people that have been saying the same thing and working in the same way. So I that's number one. I always felt very strong supporter of Dominique's work in that way. I think a lot of the classical French dressage principles, just as Walter Zettel, aspiring to work with him, but I think even principles from ancient Greece, I reread some of the text down to the bits that we use, and you find a lot of goodness in that. I try to, in my philosophy, have drawn from a lot of the classics, whether it be French or Greek or German, but I think the ones that for me have stayed on have been mostly the French tradition, combination of that and physics, and some of the ancient Greek texts that I've been able to draw from. And that's kind of what has made my work a little bit different, that can explain some of these things and maybe move closer to things that have endured through time, that maybe are not as sexy or maybe as fashionable, but in the end, with a little bit of patience, you see the horse. The proof is always in the pudding.
Yes. Now, I know your background, did you start as a writer and get into psychology, or did you start as a psychologist and got into being a writer and trainer?
Initially I worked, because it's kind of a strange story, because I learned English as a child reading books on saddles and horses, really. I had very humble beginnings in Greece. We had a few riding schools at the time, and they were all run by Greek cavalrymen, but who were trained in France. So a lot of the foundation that I had was coming from the French, like vaucherists, which is kind of a faux pas right now, but there's a lot of learnings in that. So a lot of the breeds I worked when I was a young girl, at the Aklotekis, the thoroughbreds, a lot of the hotter horses, and I learned to long line way before I even rode. And when I did ride, you couldn't ride without reins for 3 months or so until you had a pretty good seat. And then when I came to the States and as a young woman, I did a lot of working student positions with anybody and everybody that would allow me to come. So I learned a lot about different breeds. And even throughout graduate school, I earned my way through graduate school by taking on working student positions and so forth. So I've always, riding and horses have always been, in fact, I raised horses when I was in France for 2 years and did that. So I had a little bit of everything since I was young. And then the decision to get a doctorate was largely focused on, it's natural to me. I enjoy working with people I think I graduated top of my class, and it was a breeze for me, except for my dissertation, because it's natural. But my family felt very strongly that a woman in this industry, with all its ups and downs, in the end, it's a luxury sport for many of us. We're fortunate to have horses. We're fortunate to, like the ancient Greeks would sit around and eating grapes and talking and discussing about the theories of music and so forth. It's for me a discipline that I will never stop exploring and learning. So, but I knew that can also mean the ebbs and flows of the industry can wreak havoc on your finances. I know a lot of colleagues that have difficulty, especially later in the years, and I thought that a degree in psychology would at least, number one, remove some of the pressures financially. I never make decisions for my horses based on finances. I have the fortune of being able not to. So if I have to decide on a horse's training protocol, and I have to say to someone, I'm sorry, I can't take you because I'm feeling pressured, but not by a certain agenda, I have the luxury of doing that. That neutralizes things for me quite a bit. But I've only...
Nice, yeah, that you're able to do that, yeah.
I have a clinical, I see patients maybe 4 hours of a week, and I teach 1 day a week, and the rest of my week is entirely horses. So it's a good balance. Yeah.
That's a really smart way to do things. I know the last few years with the way the economy here in the U.S. has been, it's been a real struggle for a lot of people who are professionals in every aspect of the horse industry. It's been very sad to watch barns close and breeders stop breeding and tack shops close, and breaking my heart.
Yeah.
But you're right.
We'll get back up again. It'll come back, and I see it's improved much better. And internationally, we I think our advances here in the States with horses and wellness are trickling into abroad, and I see that, and that's exciting. And I know that whenever we always come to the horse being open to new things. It just makes us better people, better riders. I've always felt that.
Yeah. So do you have a basic philosophy when it comes to training horses?
Yes. The basic philosophy is, your partner has to be comfortable. You come to with the energy of ensuring that they are mentally and physically comfortable. How you do that, in what way, what protocol, what lunge, including lunge work and hand work, what type of riding. But the basic premise is that, how can I make you comfortable? What can I do to make you happy, both mentally and physically? And that, I think, oftentimes, to know what to do to get your partner comfortable physically is a whole study in itself. And I think Dominique, he gives a template to people with the hand work and lunge work to help at least give the basics of ensuring that the horse is moving correctly. And that's part of the relationship too. And then the responsibility of how to prepare a horse mentally. There's a lot of work right now in the equitation sciences, for example, learning theory. My philosophy does focus a lot on that too. How to explain things to horses that they can understand it. Knowing also full well that you don't have to go through repetitions. They're not a dumb animal. Sometimes one trial learning, as they call it. Sometimes, that connection is so deep that, for example, as with my Marwari stallion, I just lift my leg and he did the jambette. I didn't need to repeat it or give him food treats or in any way. That can happen. That can exist. So that's essentially, in a nutshell, the basic philosophy. And Dominique talks about we ride as we are, we ride as we live. And I think that just parallels what we both are living.
That is something, that idea of drilling. I don't know why human beings feel it's necessary to do that. If we get that from how we're trained in public schools or what it is, but that was one other thing I noticed and tried after watching Dominique's, the one video I had seen, that when you get it right, stop right there. Don't do it again. Just don't do it again. And that's hard because you get excited and want to do it again because that was great. And then the horse goes, well, I must not have done it right because we're doing it again. Yeah. And then they do it wrong.
Right. Yes.
Yeah.
It's so hard to. It is the hardest thing. It's hard to not do. Learning to just be is a difficult thing, because we want to get up there and do things, and left leg fight rein, this and that, and it's very difficult to recognize that they understand and can be so much more for us if we get out of our own way. I mean, I have riders that ride Grand Prix, and they come to me kind of secretly, wanting a little bit of an idea of some of that, to be able to just make their rides a little bit more refined. And that's what we work on. Half the time is just getting out of one's own way and learning how to do all the time. And what does it mean to be?
So different from what we're used to, isn't it? We think we have to do more, and it's actually do less. Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. That's hard. Oh dear. So what is your greatest accomplishment in terms of training horses? Do you have a good story for us?
Oh my goodness! The one is by far, as I've mentioned my Whitey Stallion, and I'll mention him again. He was probably my biggest accomplishment, I have to say, because to be able to stay soft and kind, be able to explain things to him step by step in a way that was clear, be super present for him. He was a young stallion, and I had about 3 months to prepare him for the Queen's Jubilee at the Royal Windsor Show. I had no idea what I was getting, and when I got it, he was a very interesting character. And any idea of what I thought, I came in with an idea of what I was going to do, kind of by month one, by month two, by month three, I'll do this, and I quickly realized that wasn't going to happen. So I had to stay true to my own philosophy of classical, kind, connected. Stay classical, kind, connected. What is endured, stay kind no matter what. And no matter what, be present with him, stay connected with him. And that whole story is fascinating, how I was able to bring him along, because his character was quite different and unusual than what I had ever had before. To give you an example of that, he never bucked me off, and I never had any troubles with him myself. I was the one that backed him, but I can say that for months even that I had him, it was so difficult just to put the saddle on. It was as every time he put it on, he'd never had it on before. And I just returned from Martha's Vineyard where they stayed during the summer, and he was kind of in the same space. It's just who he is. There's a lot of things we did to help ameliorate the anxiety, the hypervigilance. But as a stallion, the double whammy of having a very young, viable stallion who'd been bred to work with and prepare, get his attention was an interesting challenge. So we were able to use a lot of learning theory principles and get very creative. I got very creative about helping him, all the while preserving his dignity, keeping him connected to me, and never pushing through anything that he was not prepared to take on. And that's a very fine line. And there's a whole language behind it. I think they can read, if you tune in and quiet yourself, you can hear them quite audibly. So he was by far my most interesting case. Chris, I could go on and on. There's just so many stories. I just so many learnings from these animals in particular, because I have them the entire winter, and they are so different.
Wonderful. So how has your knowledge of psychology affected your approach to training horses? Can you apply what you learn in human psychology to horses?
Yeah. My education in behavioral sciences, because that's really what a psychologist, a scientist in human behavior is behavioral sciences, has made me very conscious of how learning occurs for mammals. And we are mammals, they are mammals. And so as a result of being in the behavioral sciences field, I've become an expert in learning theory, things like reinforcement schedules. It's amazing to me, Chris. People talk about positive reinforcement or negative reinforcement and immediately say, oh, negative reinforcement, well, that's bad. Well, not really, man. If you understand how reinforcement schedule works, you can get quite creative about enhancing a behavioral connection with your horse, and to ensure that they can maximize and absorb their learnings, because ultimately that's what it is. So how to explain it. And they have their distinct personalities, as many authors have written about, almost like profiling. So in having a parallel passion about humans makes me connected to each journey, the individual journeys with people's horses, So psychologists help me understand and have the vocabulary really to explain the elements necessary in our relationship. And I think that's a part and parcel why Dominique approached me to work with him, because I have that vocabulary. Being able to explain things like sensitivity, timing, and feel, break it down for people is how my knowledge of psychology has affected my working with horses, because invariably, to me, I see that I try to find more things in common between the horse and ourselves than not. And when I do, you start to learn some of the basic principles are very similar. I mean, in a way, we're predators, but when we're compromised, because we also act like prey animals. So a classic case would be, for example, if you were, here you are, a viable woman, and then you get ill and you're hospitalized. Well, guess what? All of a sudden you are stripped of your control. You're bound to a bed, and therefore no different than a horse. And you're a prey animal. You will react. Your sensitivities will be heightened in a very similar way. There's much written about that. I'm not the first one to explain it, but I'm conscious and aware of that. And so that makes me very sensitive to making sure, for example, that I have a dialogue with my horses. I talk to them in my head. I'm talking with them all the time. I'm very clear about what I want. No different than it was a human. And you'll be surprised at what you get.
Wow. Oh gosh, my mind's just racing with ideas. Now, you mentioned clinics. I know you're going to be coming to Colorado next spring, and I have my fingers crossed that I'm actually going to be in that clinic, and I'm going to take pictures and video for Jane so she can see what we're doing. But do you travel around the country giving clinics, or is this something you just started?
No, I do, and in fact, I've been actually since the economy here has been. As it was, actually for a while, was in the last 2 years I've been mostly abroad. I've been clinicking in Spain. I did some clinics in France. So I have had invitations there, and kind of actually quite interesting because I don't speak a smack of Spanish. I do speak French, but very mediocre. But they follow. I had a very quite a nice following in Spain for the work that we were doing. I'm quite enthusiastic, but I do travel everywhere. And I try to, I think this clinic in Colorado, my riders will be succumb to having to be hooked up to biofeedback equipment, jumping on trampolines, and having to endure the exercises. So you guys, yes, I have plenty of time to organize that. So yes, I do that. In fact, I've been doing more clinics in the last few years than and training of horses. I get a lot of horses that come in for rehab and retraining in the last 3 years. Yeah.
Well, looking forward to it. And you are in, let's see, I believe you're in New Jersey full-time when you're not traveling. So do you do clinics there?
Yep. In fact, we have one in November, and I'm so excited about it because this is my home base, and people here have been incredibly kind to me, and it's kind of a home-style get-together. It ends up being a really, in the end, we come to our horses, and ultimately, for me, it's about taking the love, the respect, the communication, the connection you have with your animal, and taking it to the relationships outside. And I really, having the clinics in New Jersey is important to me because it's the same people. All of us have been together struggling with the same things, working towards that higher place. And anybody that comes in is usually included like family. So it ends up being a very, very kind of a social event too.
It sounds like
it's a lot of fun. It is a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So you do clinics, and you're in New Jersey. Dominique is normally in California, I believe, most of the time when he's not in
We wave across
Brazil.
the continent to each other. That's usually how
you
it happens. Or across the oceans, usually.
And when will your book be released, The Alchemy of Lightness?
It's coming out in November this year.
Okay.
So in a month's time.
I believe it's at Trafalgar Square, same as James' publisher. And for our folks who are interested in that book, do you have a website they can go to?
I think Amazon.com is already, I think they're carrying it. In fact, I got my first copy the other day, and I gave it to a very, very, very dear friend of mine, and it looked fantastic. And then anyone interested can they can go to Trafalgar Square Publishing House. There's a number of wonderful texts coming out in addition to ours at the same time, and I think it's posted there too. That's probably the best places. Best places, Amazon and Trafalgar.
Okay, and for our folks who would be interested in doing clinics with you or having you out to their barn, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Oh, the best way is probably just visit my website, and I have an email there, and just write me, and I'll call you right back. I love talking to people. I'm not the best with email, so I always apologize in advance, but usually it's just myname.com, and it's there.
Okay, and that's Maria Katsamanis, and it's spelled Katsamanis. Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay, so we don't pronounce the S at the end like most of us Americans will want to do. So, all right. So it's just mariakatsamanis.com then is the best way to find you?
Yes, that's right, please.
All right,
that's
wonderful.
Right.
Well, this is just fascinating. I'm going to go to Amazon as soon as we hang up here and see if I can get a copy of your new book. I can't wait to read that.
Well, thank you, and I can't wait to meet everyone there in Colorado. Thank you for the invitation, Chris.
Well, it'll be fun to actually meet you, and I know Jane's audience is all over the world. I know lots and lots of people in the New Jersey area, so maybe you may end up with some visitors that you aren't aware of yet. Okay. And Canada and Australia, yeah.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Wonderful. All right, Maria. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to be with us, and good luck with your new book. We're looking forward to it. So thanks for being with us today, and for our listeners, thank you for joining us on Jane's Voice Interviews with the Experts. This is Chris Garrett, and we'll talk to you again next time. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.